Why do Thai people leave food for spirits? A sleep story and cultural discovery through Thailand. Chapter 1. The breakfast nobody ate. Before I came to Thailand, I believed something very simple. Food was for people. You cooked it, you ate it, and if nobody ate it, it was wasted. That seemed perfectly logical to me. At least, that was what I thought. My name is Oliver Bennett. I am a travel writer from England. Several years ago, I traveled through Southeast Asia searching for stories that rarely appeared in guidebooks. I wanted to understand how people lived, how they thought, what they believed, and most importantly, why. One quiet morning in Thailand, I discovered a mystery that stayed with me for years. It began with a plate of rice, a small plate placed carefully beside a tiny house, and nobody touched it. The first time I noticed it was in a small neighborhood outside Chiang Mai. The rainy season had recently ended. The sky was bright and clean. Golden sunlight filtered through mango trees. Birds sang somewhere above the rooftops. The air carried the smell of jasmine and grilled pork from a nearby market. I had rented a small room owned by an elderly Thai woman named Mali. Every morning she woke before sunrise. By 6 o'clock, she was already sweeping leaves from her garden. One morning, I sat on the porch drinking coffee. The world felt wonderfully quiet. Then I noticed something unusual. Molly walked outside carrying a tray. On the tray sat a bowl of rice, a banana, a small glass of water, and several marigold flowers. She carried them toward a miniature wooden house standing beneath a large tree. The little structure looked almost like a tiny temple. Its roof was decorated with delicate carvings. Small statues stood around it. Everything looked neat and carefully maintained. Molly placed the food in front of the tiny house. Then she pressed her palms together, closed her eyes, and stood silently for a moment. Afterward, she smiled softly and returned inside. The food remained there, untouched. I watched for nearly an hour. Nobody came. No children. No animals. No birds. Nothing. Finally, curiosity defeated politeness. Molly, I asked later, who was the food for? She looked surprised. The spirits. The spirits? Yes. She said it so naturally that I thought I had misunderstood. The spirits eat rice? She laughed gently. Not a mocking laugh, a patient laugh. The kind teachers use when a student asks an innocent question. No, then why leave it? Her smile widened. Because eating is not the important part. That answer somehow created even more questions. That evening, rain drifted across the village. The sound of water tapping against leaves filled the darkness. Motorcycles passed occasionally along the road. Somewhere a dog barked. I sat on the porch listening to the rain. The spirit house stood quietly beneath a tree. Its tiny roof glistened under a yellow garden lamp. The plate of rice was still there, now slightly dry, still untouched. I stared at it, trying to understand. Back home in England, such a thing would seem strange, perhaps even superstitious. But here, nobody appeared to find it unusual. People walked past without staring. Children ignored it. Neighbors had their own spirit houses too. Some larger, some smaller, many decorated with flowers. Almost all had food or drinks nearby. It felt less like an exception and more like a normal part of life. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. A soft mist floated through the village. Roosters crowed in the distance. The air felt cool and peaceful. As the sky slowly brightened, I saw Molly carrying another tray. This time I followed her. May I watch? Of course. She placed fresh rice before the spirit house. Then she added sliced fruit, a small cup of tea, and fresh flowers. Everything was arranged carefully, almost respectfully. When she finished, she turned toward me. Do you know why many Thai people do this? I admitted that I did not. She nodded. I think many foreigners don't. I laughed. That is true. For a moment, she looked toward the little house, then back at me. Maybe the spirit house is not really about spirits. That answer surprised me. What do you mean? She thought carefully before speaking. Sometimes, traditions teach people how to live. The morning breeze rustled leaves overhead. Sunlight began touching the rooftops. The village slowly awakened around us. And for the first time, I sensed that this tiny house might contain a much larger story. A story about gratitude, memory, respect, and a way of seeing the world that many visitors never notice. I had arrived thinking Thailand was simply a beautiful country. Temples, beaches, street food, smiling people. But now another layer was beginning to reveal itself. A quieter layer, one hidden in ordinary mornings, beside a plate of rice, outside a tiny house. And I had a feeling that my understanding of Thailand was about to change. As the sun climbed higher into the sky, Molly smiled. Tomorrow, she said, I will tell you where spirit houses come from. And somehow, that sounded far more interesting than any tourist attraction. The little house stood peacefully beneath the tree. The rice remained untouched, yet somehow, it no longer seemed wasted at all. And under the warm Thai morning sun, I found myself looking forward to the next chapter of the mystery. Chapter 2: The Tiny House Beneath the Tree. The next morning, I woke to the soft sound of sweeping. It was still early, the kind of early when the world is not fully awake yet. The sky above Chiang Mai was pale blue. A thin layer of mist rested between the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster called once. Then again, the air smelled of wet soil, banana leaves, and warm rice. I stepped quietly onto the porch. Molly was already in the garden. Her broom moved slowly across the ground. Soft, steady, almost like music. Beside her, the spirit house stood beneath the old tree. In the morning light, it looked different, less mysterious, more familiar, like something that belonged there. Molly noticed me and smiled. You wake early today. I didn't want to miss the story. She laughed softly. Good. Stories are best in the morning. She placed the broom against the wall and walked toward the spirit house. Today, she carried no food yet, only a small bowl of water and fresh flowers. She changed the old flowers first. Carefully, not rushing, not treating it like a chore. Then she poured the old water near the roots of the tree. Nothing was wasted. Even the water returned to the earth. I stood beside her silently. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then I asked, do all Thai houses have spirit houses? Molly shook her head. No, not all, but many. Why here? Why under the tree? She looked upward. The branches spread above us like green hands. This tree was here before my house. I followed her gaze. The tree was enormous. Its bark was dark and textured. Tiny plants grew along its trunk. Birds moved somewhere inside its leaves. Molly touched the trunk gently. When we built the house, my father said we must respect what was here before us. What was here? She smiled. Land, trees, wind, maybe spirits, maybe memory. I liked that answer. It was not too certain, not too dramatic. It left room for mystery. Back home, I was used to people speaking of land as property. Something bought, sold, measured, owned. But Molly spoke of land as if it had a past, as if it had dignity, as if humans were not the first guests to arrive. She looked at the tiny house. Thai people believe that when we live somewhere, we should not behave like we are the only ones there. I repeated her words quietly. Not the only ones there. She nodded. Yes, that is why we offer food, water, flowers. Not because spirits need food like people, but because we remember to be humble. A breeze passed through the garden. The marigolds trembled. The small statues seemed almost awake in the golden light. For the first time, I began to understand. The offering was not a transaction. It was not payment. It was not fear. It was a gesture, a small daily reminder that life is shared. With people, with nature, with ancestors, with things unseen. Later that morning, Molly invited me to walk with her to the market. The road was narrow and quiet. Houses stood close together. Some painted blue, some green, some left in plain wood. Almost every garden had something living in it. Papaya trees, frangipani, banana plants, tiny pots of basil, and in several yards I saw spirit houses. Some were simple, a small wooden platform beneath a roof. Others were bright and elaborate, painted red and gold, decorated with garlands, guarded by small figures. One had a bottle of red soda placed beside it. Another had rice, incense, and tiny cups. I pointed to the red soda. Why soda? Molly smiled. Some people believe spirits like sweet things. Do they? She laughed. Maybe. Maybe people like giving sweet things. That answer stayed with me. Maybe people like giving sweet things. At the market, the morning was already alive. Vendors arranged vegetables in careful piles. Long beans, eggplants, morning glory, small green chilies. The smell of coconut milk drifted from a dessert stall. Fish sizzled over charcoal. A woman chopped herbs with quick, gentle movements. Motorbikes hummed past slowly. Nobody seemed hurried. Molly bought sticky rice wrapped in banana leaves. She bought mangoes, then jasmine garlands from an old woman sitting beside a basket of flowers. The garlands smelled soft and sweet, like rain and prayer. These are for the spirit house? I asked. Yes, and some for the Buddha room. She handed me one garland. Smell. I did. The fragrance was delicate, not loud, not perfume-like. It felt clean, peaceful. Flowers are beautiful for a short time, Molly said. That is why they are good offerings. Because they don't last? Because they remind us that life doesn't last. She said it gently, not sadly, just honestly. And somehow the morning market felt deeper after that. Every flower, every bowl of rice, every flame of incense, all of it seemed to whisper the same quiet truth. Life is temporary, so be grateful while it is here. On our walk home, we passed a small shop. An old man sat outside repairing a bicycle tire. Next to him stood a spirit house with a tiny elephant statue beside it. He saw me looking and smiled. First time seeing, he asked in English. Not first time, I said, but first time trying to understand. He laughed. Ah, very different. Molly introduced him as Uncle Somchai. He wiped his hands on a cloth and invited us to sit. His shop smelled of rubber, dust, and sweet coffee. A fan turned slowly above the doorway. The spirit house stood just outside, shaded by a bougainvillea vine. Foreigners sometimes ask me, Somchai said, why give food to a small house? And what do you say? He leaned back and smiled. I say, because big people need small reminders. I laughed softly. Small reminders of what? That we are not bigger than everything. He pointed toward the road. People build houses, roads, shops, hotels. Then they think they control everything. He shook his head gently. But rain still comes. Trees still grow. Illness comes. Luck comes. Customers come. Customers go. Molly nodded. So we make respect. He used the phrase naturally. Make respect. Not show respect. Not have respect. Make respect. As if respect was something created by action. A thing built again and again through small gestures. Does everyone believe in spirits? I asked. Somchai shrugged. Not same way. Some strongly, some little, some just follow family. But respect is still good. That answer felt important. In Thailand, I was beginning to see belief was often spacious. People did not always demand that every tradition fit into one strict explanation. A person could be Buddhist and still honor local spirits. A young person could use a smartphone and still place flowers before a spirit house. A shop owner could laugh about superstition and still offer water in the morning. It was not contradiction. It was coexistence. When we returned home, Molly prepared the offering. This time, she let me help. She gave me a small plate. Put rice here. I placed the rice carefully. Now banana. I added the banana. Now flowers. I placed the jasmine garland beside the plate. It felt strangely meaningful. Not because I believed exactly as Molly believed, but because I was learning to move slowly, to pay attention, to treat an ordinary action with care. Molly stood beside me. Now put it there. I placed the plate before the spirit house. For a moment, I felt awkward, like a visitor touching something sacred. But Molly smiled. Good. What should I do now? Nothing. Nothing? Just be quiet for a moment. So the garden hummed softly. Leaves shifted above us. A bird landed on the fence. Somewhere beyond the wall, a neighbor was cooking garlic in hot oil. The smell drifted through the morning air. I stood still, not praying exactly, not pretending to understand everything, just standing, just noticing. And in that quiet moment, I realized something simple. The offering changed the person who gave it, not the spirit, not the rice. The person, it made the giver pause. It made the giver remember. It made the giver begin the day not with taking, but with giving. That was the first truth I learned. Thai spirit offerings are not only about feeding invisible beings, they are about training the heart toward gratitude. The second truth came later that afternoon. Rain clouds gathered above the village. The sky darkened slowly. Molly and I sat on the porch drinking tea. The spirit house stood beneath the tree. Fresh flowers glowed softly in the dim light. Is the spirit house Buddhist? I asked. Molly shook her head. Not exactly. That surprised me. I thought Thailand was mostly Buddhist. Yes, but Thai life has many layers. She counted gently on her fingers. Buddhism, ancestors, nature spirits, family customs, local stories. She looked toward the garden. All together. I watched rain begin falling in thin silver lines. So the spirit house comes from older beliefs? Yes, old beliefs. Before many things, people lived close to forests, rivers, mountains. They respected what they could not control. The rain grew heavier. Water ran from the roof in clear streams. The world became softer, blurred. Molly continued. In Buddhism, we learn about karma, compassion, impermanence. But in daily Thai life, people also remember the land, the house, the unseen protectors. She smiled. It is like layers of cloth, different colors, same blanket. I loved that image. Different colors, same blanket. It explained Thailand better than any guidebook ever had. The third truth arrived just before sunset. The rain stopped. The garden smelled clean and green. Drops of water clung to leaves. Molly walked to the spirit house and removed the old food. She did not throw it carelessly into the bin. Instead, she placed some near the base of the tree. A bird soon came. Then another. A small brown squirrel appeared on the wall. The offering had not been eaten by spirits, but it had not been wasted. It returned to the living world. Quietly, naturally, I thought back to my first judgment. Food was for people. If nobody ate it, it was wasted. Now that thought seemed too narrow. Perhaps food could also be a message, a memory, a gesture of respect, a way to begin the day with humility. That night, the village settled into darkness. Crickets sang in the grass. The air was cool after rain. Somewhere nearby, someone played an old Thai song softly on the radio. I sat at the small wooden desk in my room and wrote in my notebook. In Thailand, some houses have another house beside them, a small house for the unseen. But perhaps the real purpose is not to house spirits. Perhaps it is to make room inside the human heart. Room for gratitude, room for humility, room for the possibility that the world is larger than what we can explain. I closed the notebook. Outside, the spirit house rested beneath the tree. Its flowers were fresh, its tiny roof still shining with rain. And for the first time, I did not see the offering as strange. I saw it as gentle. A quiet conversation between people and place, between the visible and the invisible, between today and everything that came before. As I lay down to sleep, the rain began again. Softly at first, then steady. The sound filled the room like a lullaby. Before my eyes closed, I remembered what Uncle Somchai had said. Big people need small reminders. And beneath the rain-washed trees of northern Thailand, I understood exactly what he meant. Chapter 3. The Woman Who Fed the Morning. The rain continued through most of the night. Not the violent kind of rain that arrives with thunder and wind. This was the gentle rain of northern Thailand. A patient rain, the kind that seems content to stay until dawn. I slept deeply. And when I woke, the world felt washed clean. The leaves outside shimmered beneath drops of water. The garden glowed with fresh shades of green. Even the air seemed brighter. I stepped onto the porch carrying a cup of coffee. The village was still quiet. A few motorcycles moved along the road. A dog stretched lazily beneath a fence. Somewhere nearby, someone was cooking rice. The familiar fragrance drifted through the cool morning air. Then I saw Molly. As always, she was already awake. As always, she carried a tray. Rice, fruit, flowers, water. The simple morning ritual continued, day after day, without fail. And suddenly I found myself wondering something. Not about spirits, not about traditions, not even about religion. I wondered about Molly. Why had she continued doing this for so many years? What kept the ritual alive? When she finished placing the offerings before the spirit house, I joined her in the garden. Molly, I asked, how long have you been doing this? She looked thoughtful. Almost my whole life. Every day? Almost every day. I laughed softly. That's incredible. She smiled. It doesn't feel incredible. It doesn't? No. She looked toward the small spirit house. It feels normal. For several moments, we watched the sunlight slowly spread across the garden. Then she said something unexpected. When I was young, I didn't care about it. That surprised me. You didn't? She shook her head. No, I thought it was old-fashioned. I laughed. Really? Of course. She smiled at the memory. When I was a teenager, I wanted modern things. Fashion, music, movies. She waved her hand dismissively. I thought spirit houses were for old people. That sounded familiar. No matter where one travels in the world, every generation seems to believe it is discovering something new. And every generation eventually realizes that some old traditions survive for a reason. What changed? I asked. Molly sat down on a wooden bench. I joined her. For a few moments, she listened to the birds singing in the garden. Then she spoke quietly. My grandmother. I waited. Every morning she made offerings. She smiled softly, the same way I do now. The breeze moved gently through the trees. The garden seemed to lean closer as she continued. When I was a little girl, I followed her everywhere. I could almost picture it. A young Molly. Small sandals, messy hair, walking through the garden at dawn, watching her grandmother prepare flowers and rice. My grandmother used to say something. What was that? Molly smiled. She said the offering is not for the spirits. I laughed. That's what you told me. Yes, she nodded. Because she told me. The morning sunlight touched the spirit house. The tiny golden roof seemed to glow. My grandmother said the offering is for the person giving it. I sat quietly, listening. She continued. Every day we wake up and immediately think about ourselves. She pointed toward the village. My work, my problems, my plans, my worries. I nodded. That sounded very familiar. Not only in Thailand, everywhere. The offering interrupts that. How? It reminds us that we are connected. The word lingered in the air. Connected, not independent, not separate. Connected to family, to neighbors, to the land, to the past, to things larger than ourselves. Molly smiled. My grandmother said, if you begin the day by giving something, your heart stays softer. A bird landed near the spirit house. It tilted its head curiously, then hopped away. I watched it disappear into the garden, and I thought about my own mornings. Back in England, rushing, checking messages, thinking about deadlines, thinking about work, thinking about myself. Rarely beginning the day with gratitude. Rarely beginning the day with giving. Perhaps that was why this ritual fascinated me so much. Not because it was mysterious, but because it was simple. And simplicity is often harder than complexity. Later that morning, Molly invited me to accompany her to a nearby temple. The temple stood on the edge of the village, hidden among tall trees. Its golden roof reflected sunlight through the branches. The air smelled faintly of incense and wet earth. We removed our shoes before entering. The stone beneath my feet felt cool, peaceful. Inside the temple grounds, several elderly women were arranging flowers. Others swept leaves from the pathways. Nobody appeared hurried. Nobody seemed stressed. Everything moved at the pace of breathing. Slow, natural, comfortable. An elderly monk sat beneath a tree speaking quietly with visitors. Molly greeted him respectfully. then introduced me. The monk smiled warmly. His eyes carried the calm confidence of someone who had spent many years observing life. We sat beneath the shade of the tree. The leaves rustled softly overhead. I decided to ask the question that had been growing in my mind. Why do Thai people leave food for spirits? The monk smiled, not because the question was foolish, but because he had probably heard it many times before. What do you think? He asked. I considered the question carefully. A few days ago, I would have said superstition. He nodded. And now? I looked around at the temple, the trees, the people quietly caring for the grounds, the peaceful atmosphere. I think it has something to do with gratitude. The monk smiled wider. Good. Then he pointed toward the large tree above us. Do you see this tree? Yes. Did you plant it? No. Did Molly plant it? No. Did I plant it? No. The monk nodded. Yet all of us enjoy its shade. A breeze moved through the branches. Cool air drifted across the courtyard. The leaves whispered overhead. The monk continued. Many traditions remind us that we receive more than we create. I thought about that. The tree, the land, the rain, the food, the people who came before us, the roads we travel, the knowledge we inherit. So much of life is received. Very little is truly created alone. The monk leaned back slightly. When people leave offerings, they remember this. Remember what? That life is a gift. The simplicity of the answer struck me. Life is a gift, not an achievement, not a possession, a gift. We sat quietly for a while, listening to birds, listening to wind, listening to distant temple bells. Then the monk added something I never forgot. In modern life, people become consumers. I listened carefully. They consume information, consume entertainment, consume products, consume experiences. He smiled gently. But traditions teach us to become contributors. The word settled deeply inside me. Contributors, people who give, people who care, people who leave something good behind. Suddenly, the offering made even more sense. Each morning was an act of contribution. Small, quiet, almost invisible, yet meaningful. As the morning continued, we walked through the temple grounds. Children fed fish in a pond, lotus flowers floated on the water. An old woman offered incense before a shrine. Everything felt interconnected, not because everyone believed exactly the same thing, but because everyone participated in the same rhythm of respect. The temple, the spirit house, the offerings, the flowers, the greetings, the smiles. They were all different expressions of the same underlying idea. Life is shared. That afternoon, another discovery awaited me. Molly introduced me to a woman named Auntie Ploy. She lived several houses away. Her garden was famous throughout the neighborhood. Flowers covered nearly every corner. Orchids hung beneath trees. Butterflies floated through the air. Small ceramic animals peeked from among the plants. And beside her spirit house stood several bowls of food, more than I had ever seen before. Rice, fruit, desserts, even tiny cups of colorful jelly. I laughed. Your spirits must be very hungry. Auntie Ploy laughed so hard she nearly dropped her watering can. No. She wiped tears from her eyes. Not hungry. Then why so much food? She smiled warmly. Because I enjoy preparing it. The answer surprised me. She noticed, then nodded knowingly. You think it is about spirits, isn't it? A little. She pointed toward the bowls. But mostly it is about generosity. Generosity. Another word I kept hearing. Gratitude, humility, respect, generosity. Each conversation seemed to reveal another layer. Auntie Ploy sat beside her garden. The afternoon sunlight painted everything gold. When I prepare offerings, I remember my parents. She pointed toward an old photograph hanging inside her house. They taught me kindness. Then another photograph. My grandparents taught me patience. Then she smiled. The offering helps me remember. Suddenly, I understood something important. The spirit house was not only connected to spirits, it was connected to memory. Every offering carried invisible stories. Stories of parents, grandparents, teachers, communities, people who shaped a life. Perhaps that was why the ritual felt so alive. It was never only about the unseen. It was also about remembering those who once stood beside us. As evening approached, the sky slowly turned orange. The village settled into its familiar rhythm. Children rode bicycles home, dogs wandered through narrow lanes. Cooking aromas drifted from open kitchens. Garlic, lemongrass, chili, rice. Molly and I sat once again on the porch. The spirit house glowed beneath a small lantern. The garden hummed softly with insects. For a long while, neither of us spoke. Then I asked, "Do you think spirits are real?" Molly smiled. A calm smile, a thoughtful smile, the kind of smile that appears when there is no simple answer. Finally, she spoke. "I think respect is real." The evening breeze moved through the trees. "I think gratitude is real." The leaves rustled softly. "I think kindness is real." Somewhere nearby, a gecko clicked. Molly looked toward the spirit house. And if a tradition helps people remember those things, she smiled, then maybe that is enough. The stars slowly appeared overhead, one by one. Tiny lights scattered across the darkness. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the sounds of the village preparing for sleep. And for the first time since arriving in Thailand, I felt that I was beginning to understand. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough to see beyond the surface. Enough to realize that what looked like a plate of rice was actually a lesson repeated every morning, generation after generation, a lesson about gratitude, about memory, about generosity, about living gently within a world that existed long before us. As darkness settled over the garden, the spirit house stood quietly beneath the tree, its flowers fresh, its tiny lantern glowing, its presence calm and reassuring. And somewhere deep inside, I began to understand why Molly called it normal. Because perhaps the most extraordinary things in life are the things we practice every day. Small acts, quiet acts, acts that slowly shape the heart. The offering was one of those acts. And tomorrow, I would discover how this tiny tradition connected not only to families and villages, but to all of Thailand itself. Chapter 4. The Spirits of the Land and the Heart. That night, I slept with the windows open. The air was cool after several days of rain. Somewhere beyond the garden, frogs sang their evening songs. Crickets answered from the grass. The sounds blended together like a slow orchestra hidden in the darkness. For a long time, I lay awake listening, thinking, reflecting on everything I had learned. Before arriving in Thailand, I had imagined spirit houses as strange relics from the past, something mysterious, something old-fashioned, something that modern people would eventually abandon. But each day seemed to reveal the opposite. The tradition was still alive, not because people feared it, not because they were forced to follow it, but because it continued to teach something valuable, something human, something timeless. The next morning began before sunrise. A thin silver moon still hung above the trees. The sky carried only the faintest hint of blue. The village remained quiet, peaceful, almost dreamlike. I stepped outside, carrying a cup of tea. Molly was already sitting on the porch, waiting as though she had expected me. She smiled. "Today we go somewhere special." "Where?" She pointed toward the mountains visible beyond the village, a soft outline resting against the horizon. "There is an old temple." I followed her gaze. The mountains seemed ancient, silent, patient, as though they had been watching over the valley for centuries. A few hours later, we were traveling along a narrow road lined with rice fields. The landscape unfolded slowly around us. Bright green fields stretched toward distant hills. Water buffalo grazed lazily near small ponds. White birds stood motionless among the grass. Farmers worked beneath wide hats. The world felt unhurried, comfortable, as though time moved differently here. Eventually, we reached the temple. It stood halfway up a forested hillside. The road ended beneath enormous trees. Their roots twisted across the earth like ancient rivers. The air smelled of leaves and rain. Birdsong echoed through the forest. The temple itself was modest. No grand crowds, no buses, no souvenir shops. just peaceful buildings nestled among nature, the kind of place travelers rarely discover. And perhaps because of that, the kind of place where stories still survived. As we climbed the stone steps, I noticed something familiar, a spirit house, then another, and another. Several stood among the trees surrounding the temple grounds. Flowers rested beside them. Small offerings sat nearby. Fresh water, fruit, rice. I paused. Even here, deep in the forest, the tradition remained. Molly noticed me looking. You see? I nodded. They're everywhere. She smiled, almost. An elderly caretaker was sweeping leaves beneath a giant banyan tree. His movements were slow and steady. When he saw us, he greeted Molly warmly. His name was Arun. His face carried the lines of many years, but his eyes were bright, curious, kind. After a while, we sat together beneath the banyan tree. Its branches stretched outward like a living cathedral. Cool shadows covered the ground. The forest hummed softly around us. I asked the question that had been growing inside me. Why are spirit houses so important in Thailand? Arun thought carefully before answering. Then he pointed toward the forest. What do you see? Trees. He nodded. What else? Birds. Good. What else? I looked further. The mountain. The wind. The insects. The streams. Arun smiled. Exactly. Then he asked something unexpected. Which part belongs to humans? I opened my mouth, then stopped, because suddenly the answer seemed less obvious. The trees belong to themselves. The birds belong to themselves. The mountain certainly did not belong to us. Neither did the river, nor the wind, nor the sky. Arun nodded. Long ago, people understood this more clearly. The leaves rustled above us. Sunlight danced across the ground. He continued. Before modern cities, before roads, before electricity, his hand moved gently toward the forest. People lived very close to nature. I imagined ancient villages surrounded by jungle, dark forests stretching for miles, mountains rising beyond the horizon, rivers shaping daily life. The world must have felt very different then, much larger, much less predictable. Arun smiled. When people cannot control nature, they learn respect. That sentence lingered in my mind. When people cannot control nature, they learn respect. Perhaps that explains something about modern life too. Many of us live surrounded by technology, climate control, artificial light, digital maps, instant information. It becomes easy to forget how dependent we remain on things beyond our control. Rain, sunlight, soil, water, time, life itself. Arun pointed toward a nearby spirit house. Spirit houses remind people not to become arrogant. I remembered Uncle Samchai's words. Big people need small reminders. Different people, same lesson. As the morning passed, Arun shared stories from his childhood. Stories of rural Thailand decades ago. Stories of farming villages. Stories of families gathering after sunset. Stories of grandparents teaching children to respect trees, rivers, and land, not because nature was worshipped, but because nature was appreciated. There was a difference, a subtle difference, yet an important one. At midday, the temple bells rang softly. The sound floated through the forest, gentle, peaceful, timeless. Visitors moved quietly through the grounds. Some prayed, some meditated. Others simply sat beneath trees, enjoying the stillness. I noticed something that fascinated me. Many younger people visited the spirit houses too. University students, young couples, teenagers carrying smartphones, modern people living modern lives, yet still participating in ancient traditions. Back home, traditions were often described as something old, something fading, something left behind. But here, tradition seemed alive, not frozen in the past, growing alongside the present. During lunch, I asked Molly about this. Why do young people continue these traditions? She smiled. Because they still mean something. Simple, direct, true. Many traditions disappear because people stop finding meaning in them. Others survive because they continue answering human needs. The need for gratitude, the need for connection, the need for remembrance, the need for belonging. These needs never really change. Only the world around them changes. Later that afternoon, clouds drifted across the mountains. The light became softer, golden, dreamlike. Molly and I walked through a quiet section of the temple grounds. Several enormous trees stood there, ancient guardians watching over the hillside. At the base of one tree sat another spirit house, small, simple, beautiful. Flowers rested beside it. Nothing extravagant, nothing expensive. Just care, just attention, just respect. I found myself standing quietly before it, no longer analyzing, no longer questioning, simply observing. And as I stood there, something became clear. The spirit house was not really about fear of spirits, nor was it merely about religion. It was about relationship. Relationship with place, relationship with memory, relationship with gratitude, relationship with life itself, a way of remembering that we do not stand alone. That realization stayed with me as we drove back toward the village. The late afternoon sun painted the rice fields gold. Farmers slowly returned home. Birds crossed the sky in graceful formations. Everything seemed calm, balanced, connected. Back at the house, Molly prepared the evening meal. The smell of garlic and basil filled the air. The familiar sounds of village life drifted through the open windows. Children laughing, motorcycles passing, dogs barking in the distance. The ordinary music of everyday life. As darkness approached, we sat outside one final time. The spirit house glowed softly beneath his lantern, a warm light in the gathering night. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The silence felt comfortable, not empty, just peaceful. Eventually, I turned toward Molly. I think I understand now. She smiled. Only now? I laughed. Maybe a little. She nodded. A little understanding is enough. Then she looked toward the tiny house beneath the tree. When foreigners first see spirit houses, they think the story is about spirits. The lantern flickered gently. The night insects sang around us. But the deeper story is about people. I listened carefully. People remembering gratitude. People remembering humility. People remembering kindness. She paused. People remembering they are part of something larger. The words settled quietly into the evening air, and I realized they perfectly summarized everything I had learned. The spirit house was a symbol, a doorway, a daily reminder, not only of unseen spirits, but of visible virtues, gratitude, respect, generosity, connection, things easy to forget in a busy world. That night, before going to bed, I walked into the garden one last time. The village was asleep. Only the sounds of insects remained. The stars shone above the trees. The spirit house stood quietly beneath its lantern, its flowers fresh, its tiny roof glowing softly in the darkness. And suddenly, I remembered my first morning here. The plate of rice, my confusion, my assumptions, my certainty that the food was being wasted. Now, that certainty felt almost embarrassing, because the rice had never been the point. The flowers had never been the point. Even the spirits were not entirely the point. The point was the heart, the habits that shape it, the small rituals that gently teach people how to live. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the night, feeling grateful for the lesson. Tomorrow would be my last full day in the village, and one final conversation awaited me. A conversation that would reveal why this tradition continues to survive in modern Thailand, and why it may be more relevant today than ever before. Chapter 5, The Gift Nobody Could See. My final morning in the village arrived quietly, the way all meaningful endings seem to arrive. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gently, like mist drifting across a field before sunrise. I woke before dawn. The sky beyond my window was still dark. The stars had not yet disappeared. The village remained asleep. For a few moments, I simply lay in bed listening. A distant rooster, the soft rustling of leaves, the occasional chirp of an insect. Everything felt peaceful, still, suspended between night and day. I knew I would be leaving tomorrow, returning to airports, schedules, deadlines, the fast-moving rhythm of ordinary life. Yet part of me wished time would slow down. Just a little longer. I dressed quietly and stepped outside. The garden was wrapped in pale blue shadows. The spirit house stood beneath the old tree, its small lantern still glowing softly. The flowers looked fresh, as though they too had awakened early. And there, just as she had been every morning, stood Molly, holding her tray, rice, fruit, flowers, water, the same simple offering, the same gentle ritual, the same quiet beginning to another day. She smiled when she saw me. "You woke early. I didn't want to miss my last morning." She nodded. Then together we walked toward the spirit house. Neither of us spoke. There was no need. Some moments are too complete for words. The sky slowly brightened above us. Birds began singing from the trees. A cool breeze drifted through the garden. Molly placed the offerings carefully before the tiny house. Then she stood quietly, hands together, eyes closed, peaceful, still, present. After a minute, she opened her eyes and smiled. Done. I looked at the plate of rice, the flowers, the glass of water, and something about the scene felt different now. Not because the ritual had changed, but because I had changed. The same offering that once seemed mysterious now felt familiar, comforting, meaningful. We sat together on the porch. The first rays of sunlight touched the rooftops. Golden light spread across the village. The day was beginning, my final day. After a while, I asked the question that had quietly followed me throughout my stay. "Molly, do you think Thailand will keep these traditions in the future?" She thought carefully. A dog barked somewhere down the road. A motorcycle passed slowly. The village was waking up. Finally, she answered, "Some traditions will change." I nodded. That seemed inevitable. Some will disappear. Again, I nodded. That too seemed natural. But some will remain. Why? She smiled. Because people still need them. Her answer reminded me of something the monk had said. Traditions survive when they continue answering human needs. And perhaps that was exactly what spirit houses did. Not because everyone believed the same thing, not because everyone interpreted them the same way, but because they continued teaching timeless lessons, lessons that remained valuable regardless of technology, regardless of modern life, regardless of time. The morning passed slowly. Molly prepared breakfast, sticky rice, fresh fruit, tea, simple food, comforting food, the kind that encourages conversation. As we ate, several neighbors stopped by. One brought bananas from her garden. Another brought flowers. Someone else delivered homemade desserts. The exchanges seemed effortless, natural, ordinary. Nobody kept score. Nobody calculated value. People simply shared. And suddenly, another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The spirit house was not isolated from daily life. It reflected daily life. The same generosity shown to spirits was shown to neighbors. The same respect shown to ancestors was shown to elders. The same gratitude shown to the land was shown to family. Everything connected. Everything flowed together. By late morning, the village felt fully awake. Children rode bicycles through narrow lanes. Market vendors arranged vegetables beneath colorful umbrellas. Birds darted between trees. Life unfolded in every direction. Yet despite the activity, a sense of calm remained. A rhythm, a balance, a gentleness. That afternoon, Molly suggested one final walk. We followed a small path beyond the village. Rice fields stretched toward the horizon. The mountains stood in the distance, blue and silent. The sky above was bright and endless. As we walked, I reflected on my first day in Thailand. Back then, I had carried many assumptions. I thought Thailand was mostly beaches, mostly tourism, mostly temples and street food. I had seen the country through postcards and travel brochures, beautiful images, but incomplete ones. The deeper Thailand revealed itself slowly, through conversations, through ordinary mornings, through people like Molly, and through small things that many travelers never notice, like a plate of rice beside a tiny house. We stopped near a large tree overlooking the fields. The wind moved gently through the grass. The entire landscape seemed to breathe. For a long while, we simply stood there, watching, listening, being present. Then Molly said something I never forgot. Many people think spirit houses are about giving food. I smiled. I used to think that too. She laughed softly. Then her expression became thoughtful. But the real gift cannot be seen. I waited. The real gift is what happens inside the person giving. The words settled deeply inside me because they explained everything. The rice was visible. The flowers were visible. The water was visible. But gratitude was invisible. Humility was invisible. Kindness was invisible. Those were the true offerings. The offerings that mattered most. The offerings that transformed people. And perhaps that was why the tradition had survived for so long. Not because spirits needed gifts, but because humans needed reminders. Reminders to slow down. Reminders to appreciate. Reminders to give. Reminders to remember. As the afternoon drifted toward evening, we returned to the village. The familiar sounds of daily life surrounded us. Cooking, conversation, laughter, the simple music of community. That night, several neighbors gathered at Molly's house. Someone brought fruit. Someone brought tea. Someone brought stories. The evening unfolded naturally. No schedule. No plan. Just people spending time together. At one point, Uncle Somchai arrived carrying a small bag of sweets. When he saw me, he grinned. So, he sat beside me. Do you understand spirit houses now? I laughed. A little. A little is enough. The exact same words Molly had spoken the day before. I smiled. Perhaps wisdom often sounds simple. Somchai pointed toward the spirit house glowing softly in the garden. What did you learn? The group became quiet. Waiting, I thought carefully, then answered. I learned that the food isn't really about feeding spirits. Several people nodded, encouraging me to continue. I learned that gratitude is a practice. More nodding. I learned that respect can be built through small actions. Smiles appeared around the circle, and I learned that traditions sometimes survive because they teach things people still need. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Somchai smiled. Good answer. The group laughed gently. The conversation continued late into the evening. Stories flowed. Tea was shared. The stars appeared overhead. And all the while, the spirit house remained quietly illuminated beneath the tree. Present, peaceful, part of the gathering, part of the village, part of life. Eventually, the neighbors returned home, one by one. The village grew quiet again. The night deepened. Only the insects remained awake. I stepped into the garden for one final look. The lantern beside the spirit house glowed warmly. The flowers swayed softly in the night breeze. Everything felt calm, balanced, whole. I thought back to my first question. Why do Thai people leave food for spirits? At the beginning of my journey, I had expected a simple answer. A belief, a superstition, a rule. Instead, I discovered something far richer. I discovered gratitude, humility, memory, generosity, respect, connection. I discovered a tradition that quietly teaches people how to begin each day, not with taking, but with giving, not with entitlement, but with appreciation, not with certainty, but with humility. And perhaps, most importantly, I discovered that some traditions endure because they help people become better versions of themselves. The spirit house was one example, a small example, yet powerful, like a lantern in the dark. Small enough to overlook, bright enough to guide. The night air felt cool against my skin. The stars shimmered above the village. The old tree stood watch over the garden, and beneath its branches rested the tiny house that had taught me so much. A house built for spirits, yet somehow designed to nurture human hearts. I smiled, then quietly returned inside. Tomorrow I would leave, but the lesson would travel with me. Whenever life became rushed, whenever gratitude became difficult, whenever I forgot how much I had received from others, I knew I would remember a village in northern Thailand, a kind woman named Molly, a tiny house beneath a tree, and a plate of rice that nobody ever ate. Or perhaps, in a deeper sense, everybody did. Because the nourishment was never meant for the body. It was meant for the heart. And as the village slept beneath the stars, that invisible gift continued to feed the morning. The end. Cultural insights discovered in this story. Many Thai spirit houses are not primarily about feeding spirits, but about practicing gratitude and respect. Thai spiritual traditions often blend Buddhism, local beliefs, ancestor respect, and nature appreciation into daily life. Offerings serve as daily reminders of humility, generosity, and connection with the world around us. Spirit houses reflect the Thai idea that humans share space with nature, history, and unseen aspects of life. Small rituals can shape character, helping people begin each day with mindfulness and appreciation. Thailand still holds countless stories waiting to be discovered. If you would like to continue this journey together, I hope to see you again in the next story from Thailand Through Eyes. And if there is somewhere in Thailand you wish to visit through story, leave your suggestion below. Perhaps our next journey will begin there.